vielen Dank fürs Kommen. Ich habe hier die weltberühmte Frau Miriam Fried hier zum Interview und ich hoffe, wir haben ein paar interessante Antworten für uns. Es ist schade, dass nicht so viele Musiker hier sind, junge Musiker, aber die kennen Sie ja sowieso. Und wahrscheinlich auch Ihre Antworten darauf. Aber zu so einem Festival ist es natürlich sehr toll, Sie hier zu haben. Vielen Dank. And thanks for coming. You have an enormous career as a performer and teacher in the world, and you still lived in a different world than we live today in your youth. And in the 60s, you were the first female winner of the Queen Elizabeth competition.
70s.
I was 71.
Yeah, I
Okay,
was at
good.
Paganini, it was 68.
Yeah, okay.
Elizabeth was 71.
71. In any case, you grew up kind of in the 50s and 60s, and that time it was very male-dominated, the world
Oh,
still.
yes.
And so to stand out as a female winner of this prestigious, and it's the best violin competition, arguably one of the 3 best in the world, because it has fairness and super high standards, and it had always, in those days, incredible winners as well. So to stand out there,
Jury. I mean, it was
that's what I mean.
unbelievable,
Exactly.
you know.
Yeah, can you name a few people who were in that
The
jury?
jury in the Queen Elizabeth competition was illustrious,
Yeah,
Menuhin,
yeah,
Stern,
yeah.
um,
Francescatti.
Francescatti, Sigeti,
Sigeti.
yeah. And then there were,
That's unbelievable.
Franco Gulli was the
Yeah.
lesser known
Yeah,
violinist.
that's
He was the less famous violinist. So it was, I mean, I think the difference really was that these people, maybe with the exception of Weisbrach, because he did teach, but the others never taught anything.
Yeah.
So they were not teachers, they were performers.
Yeah.
And, I remember in the first and second round, they sat in the first row, first row of the hall. So I did, and I was doing this because my hand was hot, and one of them handed me a handkerchief in the middle of my playing. It was really quite funny.
Yeah. I mean,
But very
what a
impressive.
memory it must
And
be.
Kogan, also Kogan.
Oh, and Leonid. Kogan.
So Kogan was there for the first 2 rounds, and Weisbrach came for the last round. Yeah.
I mean, when you say this, it makes my skin tingle because it's
No,
just,
it was amazing. I don't usually put anything about me up on the wall, but I have the certificate of the prize, and they all
the
signed
best
it.
signatures,
Yeah, so I
You
put it
could
up
never
for the
get.
signature, so we have it at home.
even historically. That's incredible. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so today you are one of the finest and most influential teachers, if I may say, in the world. And and I live in London and you live in Boston, right? So, but still, your presence is also in London and in Kronberg, obviously. And they invited you here to give masterclass in the Kronberg Academy. And it's wonderful that you share your vast experience with the students and the future generations of violinists. And how does your own education that started in Israel reflect on your approach to teaching?
Well, I was very lucky because I had, altogether, I would say 5 major teachers.
Yeah.
And the first
Fenwisch?
2, yes, absolutely. The first 2 were Fenwisch, Lauren Fenwisch and Alice Fenwisch. They were brother and sister. They came from Budapest. They immigrated to Israel in the 30s. And they came from that illustrious school of Leo Weidner and
Yeah.
people like that, That was the background of what I was exposed to as a child. Because I started with her when I was 8 years old. And so I really feel very lucky because I had a wonderful grounding, both technical but also musical from the very beginning. I started playing chamber music when I could barely play the violin, actually. I just played a year and a half. and I was playing chamber music on a regular basis. I was exposed to great music, and it was always emphasized very much so. Then I went to Geneva, where Laurent Federici was. He was the concertmaster of the Swiss Romand,
Yeah.
and I studied with him. That was quite short, not by choice, but because he left. He went to Toronto,
Yeah.
and so my
I see.
scholarship
Sustain.
couldn't be transferred to Toronto. I had to go to the United States.
Right.
You know, and so then I went to Joseph Gingold, who was a fantastic influence because he was the man who was totally in love with the violin. And that was a concept that I didn't know. You know, the violin was a tool, and you played the violin, and you figured out how to use it so that it did what you wanted it to. But he was just in love with the violin. You know, I remember I was there maybe 2 months, and one time he had a beautiful Strat, and he was holding the Strat in his hand, and he said, "Look at her, isn't she beautiful?" And I was so embarrassed. I thought, what is he talking about? It's so strange, you know. I mean, eventually, you know, I realized that, you know, what this love of the violin manifested itself in was a real obsession with finding the best sound to get out of this instrument, you know. And he just had the most gorgeous sound.
That's a subject I want to touch upon later
I mean,
as well.
he really did. I mean, you know, it was clear that he was singing from his soul through this violin, and it was clear to him too. You know, I mean, this was the process, and so this was a totally new way of approaching the violin, which I was not exposed to before. And then I went to study with Galamian in New York. It was the wrong order. I should have done the other way, but it doesn't matter. That's how it happened. You know, Galamian was more of a diagnostician, I would say. You know, he figured out what was wrong, and he figured out how to fix it. And of course, if you're a teacher, you do have to know that.
Yeah.
You know, and actually, if you're a violinist, you have to know that too, because if you don't know what's wrong, you don't know how to fix it. You know, so there was a total. He was also, for me, I think the most important thing that he taught me was that, you know, just because you could learn something really quickly, 95%, the last 5% is what takes the longest, and you really have to, you know, apply yourself, or else it stays in 95%, and in the concert it goes down to 85%, you know, that's not very good. So, but it's true, that's what happened, you know. So, you know, this was a concept that, you know, he absolutely hammered into me, and the way he did it was, I came to him and he gave me the Lalo Symphony Espagnole, which is not one of my favorite pieces in the whole world to begin with, and then he made me play it for a whole year because, you know, it never was quite good enough as far as he was concerned, and it really taught me a lesson.
Yeah.
It really did. So it was important, you know. And the last one to mention was somebody who is less famous, Paul Makanvitsky. I don't even know if you know the name. He was Galamian's assistant.
Yeah.
He was also his first student, and he was a remarkable violinist who unfortunately did not make a career, and he was a very frustrated man. But he was the one who introduced me to 20th century. At the time, 20th century was contemporary music. It wasn't 20th century. No longer is. You know, but I mean, he really made me realize that it's important to play it, and he taught me how to figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that was very important.
Yeah, and you continued that tradition to teach your students.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to
21st century music.
Yes, I mean, you know, the young people's job is to bring that music to life, and some of the pieces are probably terrible, but some of them are great.
We have to find out.
If you don't play them, you'll never find out. So absolutely.
Yeah. Did the Meadow Mount exist already when you went to Cologne?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Did you go there?
Yes. I went
yourself?
once. I went one summer. I actually went in '68, just before going to the Paganini competition.
Yeah.
And it was a good experience because it was a place where all you did was practice. There was nothing else you could do. So people practiced. And Galamian, I mean, he was like a taskmaster. You practiced from 8 to 1. every hour you took 5 minutes break, but not more, and he came to see if you did it, and then you practiced one more hour in the afternoon, and it was basically what everybody did. Of course, there were a few who didn't, but basically that's what everybody did. And when everybody's practicing, it's a lot easier to have that desire and discipline to do it because everybody else is doing it, so you do it too.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I've noticed that Meadowmount is quite a good training camp, if you
I
want.
think for kids, yeah. I mean, I wasn't a teenager at the time, but it served my purpose. I was preparing for the competition.
Yeah.
I mean, what's important to remember is that when we're talking about, this was 1968 and then 71 in Queen Elizabeth, there was the Laventry competition in New York. There was the Tchaikovsky competition, I think the first or second one. There was Queen Elizabeth, Paganini, and Montreal, and that was it.
It was when Jan Levitch was one, right?
Yeah, I think so. There are 5 competitions in the world. Now there are 5 competitions in every city. So I mean, it's true. I mean, I look, on the violin channel, and every day there's a winner somewhere, and I'm thinking, where did they go? And it's a totally different story. So that's why, and I won Queen Elizabeth competition in May. On May 22nd, I still remember the date, and on May 23rd, I was in my host family's living room, and there was a manager who came to see me with a list of the concerts that I will have for the next season, and with proposals from all kinds of managers from all over the world to work for me. I didn't have to go find them, they found me. This doesn't exist. There's no such a thing anymore.
It's a battle today.
So I mean, it was different. It was really the way to make a career, which I cannot say is true anymore.
Everything is more numerous today, so including
there's more people in the world.
More people, and we have also a lot of well-trained Asians who come over, very disciplined players at a younger age. They very often are already more trained than the Western kids at a younger age. Later things change a bit, but that adds to the prodigy kind of
I think the problem is that there's not more of an audience. Because if there were more people playing well, and more audience would be fine, but there isn't.
In proportion.
That I think is because the music education in the schools is getting scarcer and scarcer. That's a
So
problem.
talking about some kind of education, but that's not this education you're referring to, is about violin master classes and schools and like the Kronberg festival and masterclass teaching. What kind of standing in the world do you believe Kronberg has?
Well, Kronberg is famous because of the school, so it's a place where people, really the top quality players come automatically. And so I think as a reflection, if you do master classes in a place like that, then you attract the highest level of students. That's what happens. I think that, from the United States, one of the problems is simply that we have school already. Europeans don't have school, so you have to miss school to come. And so actually there are more Americans here now than there were last time I was here. Because last time I don't think there were any. But now there are some. And actually some of my students came because I'm not there, so they came. They're not studying with me, of course, but
they're still happy to.
They came. But I think that it's obvious that they attract the best people because you have good faculty and you have the reputation and the facilities. That's all you need.
Talking about students, what are the most common challenges you encounter when you teach gifted talent or less gifted students?
I think it's the same. I mean, we live in a world that must measure everything. you know, the best, the worst, the middle, you know, everything is in comparison to one another, and you know, there's always, you know, this great desire to measure everything. You know, music is not very conducive to doing that. You know, but the one thing about playing that you can do that way is technical proficiency. So if you know, you could tell if somebody made 100 mistakes or 2 mistakes. You know, I don't think it's particularly important, but I do think that we have created an atmosphere where a lot of young violinists think that that's what's important, you know, and everybody can measure that. And so it is to the detriment of really spending equal amount of time trying to figure out the music. You know, I mean, I, for example, lament the fact that the knowledge that students acquire in theory classes and history classes and things like that is not connected with their violin playing. They feel that it's two separate things. And so I actually give a class in our school now with a theory teacher, and we're doing a class on the Beethoven violin sonatas, you know, and he gives one lecture about the sonata, and then I give a lesson, you know, we combine the knowledge, you know, so that people actually become fascinated with the content rather than the outer, you know, picture. And so I think that that's one of the things. And the other things, unfortunately, is, you know, maybe caused by recordings. You know, we all grow up listening to recordings, and when you listen to a recording of a violin concerto, you could hear every single note of the violin. Well, it's not like that in the hall. You know, an orchestra has 80 people in it, and when all of them are playing and the violin is playing alone, it's not sure that you're going to hear every note, and I don't think it's so important either.
Yeah.
You see, but the impression that you get from the recording makes everybody absolutely obsessed with projection. You know, and so this idea of I have to play loud enough so that every note is heard. Well, loud and violin playing don't go very well together, I don't think. You know, the beauty of the violin is actually in the lower registers.
Yeah.
And yes, of course, I appreciate, you know, exuberance and grand, you know, expression, but not at the expense of, you know, sound. And so I think that this is for me, it's a constant battle, because I really, you know, my students laugh at me because I always say, you want loud, you have to be an ambulance driver. That's loud. You know, I mean, you can't do that kind of loud on the violin. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know.
What else do you think has contributed to the atmosphere change since, let's say, the mid-20th century?
Look, I mean, it's natural. Things change.
Yeah.
Change is natural, change is understandable, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And the style of playing change over the years. I mean, but listen, they changed already several times since I was a young girl, you know.
Yes.
I mean, when you think about how people played when I was a teenager, nobody plays like that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and I loved it, by the way. I mean, I think that Menuhin and Stern and people like that, I mean, they just spoke to the soul. I don't know that that's a goal today, particularly, but I don't think we're right to judge if this is better or this is worse. It just is what it is, right? You know.
I mean, I can see it from the change how we, since the 80s only, where I started, how we set up instruments. We have a different neck setting, we have different strings already. And that shows already the attitude change towards
Absolutely.
sound.
Clarity.
Yeah.
Clarity is something that is valued much more
Yeah.
than it was before.
Do you think we always longed for more brilliance and clarity and just didn't have it because the setup and the strings didn't allow it? Or do you think it is more an attitude change?
Well, I mean, this is an age-old question, right? What would have Bach written had he had the violin of today? Who knows? Do you know? I don't know. You know, so I mean, to speculate on that is silly. But we do know that he didn't like the organ of the time and he was looking for grander and grander, right? So would he have wanted that in the violin as well? I mean, we can only speculate. But the fact that Bach chose to write the longest fugue that he ever wrote for the violin, which is absolutely unsuited to play fugues, means that he imagined something bigger than what he had.
Yeah.
How bigger, what bigger meant to him, we will never know.
Yeah.
Never. But we can imagine, and I mean the bow, evolving, into a, longer, stronger, more sustained, So that was the direction. But, I look at the Brahms Sonata and I wonder, did he really want the sound to be so sustained all the time? I don't think so. I really don't think so, I mean, you look at these dynamic markings, he did not want everything to be, So, I mean, look, I think the function of music is to communicate an emotional landscape that is not communicable with words. It transcends words because he can speak through ages, through generations, through cultures, through everything, because essentially we all feel pain and joy and exuberance and anger and everything. And so music can do that without words, without, mixing up cultural connotations, etc. And so if you accept the fact that, we are trying to express all of those emotions, then we need a variety of sound.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what interests me.
Yeah.
I must say.
But that's where my question tried to lead to, that you don't, I completely agree with the topic about it. What did they think then? How can we speculate? And there's some evidence, partly from the organ, partly the way it composed and their help. For example, they had the violino piccolo in the early 17th century or late 17th century to maybe brighten up the sound of the orchestra, because if you imagine gut strings on those violins, a little bit warm and without brilliance. But during your own lifetime, since let's say more than 70 years of career, did you personally also long for more brilliance and clarity in the sound, or did it evolve without you nearly noticing?
I mean,
when you adjust violins, for example, or when you choose an instrument.
I look for ring, not for brilliance. I look for resonance. You see, I really, what I think and feel and what I teach also is that we want to play with a sound that fills the room with resonance. And for me, a loud sound doesn't, because it is thin like a line.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the volume.
Yeah.
So I personally am not looking particularly for more and more brilliant. I don't play closer and closer to the bridge, and I don't do that kind of thing. But, I mean, of course, some repertoire requires more of it than others. I think that actually some of the 20th century repertoire requires more brilliance, in the sound. But for me, that kind of sound is not particularly.
Yeah. Would you like to tell me a little bit about some nice teaching experience? Who of your students do you feel are in the past, in your memory, as somebody who maybe responded in a good way and informed into a personality through your help? Do you have some nice examples, like you have Geneva Lewis here, or you have Nancy Joe
I've had a lot of students that have, how should I put it? What I like about my students is that they all develop their own personalities. I don't think, even two of them are particularly similar to one another. And, just the example of Yura Lee, for example, who's a phenomenal violinist, decided that she wants to play violin and viola equally, and so she plays both.
Yeah.
And she plays both very, very well. You know, there's somebody like Pekka Kuusisto who,
Yeah.
you know, has gone very much his own way and incorporated folk music and jazz and all kinds of things, you know, in his global experience, you know. What makes me happy is when I see the potential in somebody, and as I watch them over the years, I see that they're accomplishing the potential, that's who I thought they would become, and they become those
Yeah.
people, you know, with a particular interest, with this particular form of expression. And, you know, so, you know, I have a 15-year-old student now. She's an American black girl who, I mean, you know, she already has
Amarin, yeah.
Amarin Almeida. She has her own voice. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
You know, she really has a voice.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, she has a presence too, and so I expect her to grow into a really significant artist.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, but I really think the job of a teacher is to teach independence and to encourage people to become who they want to be.
Yeah, it's admirable that you managed to do this. How do you manage to breathe that? Because you know, I know some also big famous teachers where I feel they all sound like that teacher,
Yeah.
and I know some teachers who manage to just enhance, find what's their quality and enhance that.
Well, because I don't
and
ever tell
obviously you
them
do
how
that.
to play.
Yeah.
Never. I always say my job is to give you the tools to play how you want to play. And so my method of teaching is asking a lot of questions. Ask my students sometimes. I think they have enough of my questions, but the purpose of the questions is to teach them to ask it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because how do you discover what to do? You ask questions. And as you find the answers, you know, that's how you form your opinions about what you want to do. And so, you know, the more you can give people tools, you know, to understand what the questions are and how to answer the questions, you know, the more independent they become, I think.
Oh, marvelous. Yeah.
I always say, one of me
wonderful.
is enough, we don't need more.
It's inevitable that since we're here in a violin place, that I ask you that question as well. And in which way do you think the instrument is an important part, and what kind of instrument in the teaching? Because I have quite often people who say to me, "Oh my God, this violin taught me how to play." Let me know what your observations and
Well,
ideas
I
are.
mean, I think that producing sound is an art. I really do. But I would be a fool to pretend that what violin you have doesn't make any difference. It would be really stupid to say that.
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference, you know. But what you have to learn first, before you have a great violin, is how to make a sound. You have to learn to understand what you want to hear, and then you have to figure out how to make the sound that way. And I always say to students that every violin is a limit. You know, especially not the greatest violins. Maybe the greatest violins don't have a limit, but you know, more modest violins have a limit. You need a new violin when you have figured out everything you can do on that violin.
Yeah.
But there's no more than you're due for another violin. You know, and I think that that's important to understand. That's why I personally, I don't think a 10 or 11-year-old needs a Strat, because they don't know what to do with it anyway. And the violin is the one that makes it sound, not them. So I don't think that it's a really the right order of things,
Yeah.
you know. But,
Everything is relative, of course.
sure, but having said it, I have a great Strat violin.
Yes, I was going to
You
come
know,
to that.
you know, so, I mean,
Golden
who am I
period.
to talk, you know? So my violin was made in 1718. And in addition to everything, else about it because it is great, really. And it has the kind of sound that I like, and so it's given me tremendous joy. I've had it since '86, so it's a long time. So in addition to all of that, it has a wonderful history because it was owned by Regina Strinasaki, who was an Italian young violinist at the time that Mozart wrote his sonata for violin and piano K454 in B flat major. And they played the premiere together. And she played this violin. So, because he wrote a letter to his father the next morning about the sound of the violin, I am speculating that he must have tried it. Of course, I have no idea if it's true or not. But I mean, for sure they were in the same room, right? So we know that. So that's the one thing. And then it belonged to Spohr. It was Spohr's violin until he died. Yeah, he had 3 Strats, and this was, he identified it as his favorite of the 3.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty nice. And then it wasn't played.
Would you like to show it?
Sure.
If you like it, you can demonstrate it.
I'll do that at the concert. Yeah. Yeah, you probably object to my rubber bands on the
No. Oh, but you only wear the rubber band. Just to not slide, or do you have something? Yeah.
Tiny little.
I think it's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's a beautiful bag.
Yeah, test it.
Yeah, it has those eyes.
Yeah.
Can you see it? It's a really beautiful violin.
Yeah.
And it sounds,
It
So
doesn't
this
look
is-
this old, doesn't it? It doesn't look this old.
oh, it's old.
Yeah.
Even older than me. Yeah, it's old.
It's a violin from the golden period of Stradivarius work.
Yeah. It
So
really
it
is
has
beautiful.
choice of outstandingly beautiful wood, which is one mark of the golden period. I did like those rubber bands.
What? You like the rubber band?
Because
My
there's
violin
another
maker
thing.
hates them. He said, take that thing off. I said,
Yeah, but in some ways, because you basically don't use a shoulder rest,
No.
which is another interesting thing, because do you also feel it actually sounds freer if you just balance it on your collarbone?
I mean, to be honest, I don't not use a shoulder rest because of that. I don't use it because the shoulder rest, and all people who use it always say to me, it's tight in one place.
Yeah.
And the last thing in the world I want is for the violin to sit tight in one
Yeah,
place. I
yeah.
want it to be flexible. Because I think that, it gives you much more flexibility with your bow.
Yeah.
Right? And so, I mean, I saw yesterday a shoulder rest that I've never seen before. A little tiny girl played with the shoulder. I mean, it was, I think, this long. And she had it going all the way to here.
Yeah.
Why? I don't understand.
Yeah.
But I have learned I don't interfere because what happens usually is that you develop a way of using your muscles that depends on the particular hold.
Yeah.
And once you start changing it and you involve other muscles and people develop all kinds of physical problems, and I don't want to be responsible for it. So
Plus, physically, people have sometimes a long
well, of
neck,
course,
and it's
people who
like-
have very long necks, it's
Yeah,
different, but
it's-
you could put it high
High
chin
chin
rest,
rest.
I think that would be better, but I don't start people. If I started people, I'd never give anybody one of those machines.
Yeah.
I never use one,
Yeah.
ever,
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah. And people always say, is there anything special about the sponge? I said, yes, it's very old. I mean, it must be 20 years old at least, Finally, every once in a while, my husband says, I think it's time to throw this one away. Can I get you another one?
Yes. That's very nice. So there's one last question I have, and I thought, what's your favorite composer?
Oh dear.
If I may ask that.
Oh dear, you may ask, but I don't think I have one.
Yeah.
the truth is that I absolutely adore music.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think I could live without music, you know, and I love so many different things.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I went to the concert last night, and I don't know if any of you were there, but I loved the Gypsy Band. I mean, I just loved it. I thought it was great, you know. And I mean, obviously, that's not what I do,
Yeah.
you know. But I mean, it was wonderful because there was joy and love in it, and that's what we need, you know. It doesn't have to be my way,
Yeah.
you know. So I mean, I like a lot of different things. Do I have more affinity with certain things than others? Sure.
Yeah.
You know,
So maybe you have a tendency.
yeah, so the classics, perhaps, I would say. Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, Bach. I have spent a lot of time playing Bach in my life, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. I actually wrote a series of lectures about it, too. But I love the romantics, too. I mean, you know, and Brahms, you know, and I love Tchaikovsky, you know, and for example, I think the Tchaikovsky concerto is perfect, you know. And it's beautiful music, you know. So, I mean, I like a lot of music. I think I spend more time listening to not violin music than I do to violin music. I started it because of my teachers who told me that I should know a lot of other music, and frankly, I spend a lot of hours listening to violin music because that's my job. And so I don't particularly require to listen to violin music when it's not my job. I listen to a lot of singers, a lot of singers. I listen to chamber music a lot. You know, so you know, it's pretty varied. You know, and I love, for example, Bartok and Stravinsky. You know. So pretty eclectic.
Maybe one more thought.
Okay.
How have you, over quite a long career already, evolved and changed your styles, attitudes, and way of playing, and even way of teaching?
I don't think that it's mostly my attitude, but with age, I've come to value space much more. I think that
Space like in...
like taking time between things, like taking time on the climax of things, you know. Like, you know, I mean, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the connection, for example, between the rules of rhetoric in speech
Yeah.
and how do you use those rules in performance. And, you know, I mean, the rules of rhetoric, I mean, it's from the Greeks, it's not anything new.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, they're very, very specific and very helpful. And so
Yeah.
I do, for example, listen to how people talk.
Yeah.
You know, and some people talk and it's very boring. It doesn't matter that they say
Yeah.
interesting things, but it's still boring because
Yeah.
their speech is not inflected. And so I pay attention to things like that, and I have paid more and more attention to it in music, you
Yeah.
know, and I feel that there is more space than modern day playing allows. And, you know, then you read things like Brahms said that a hairpin doesn't only mean that it gets louder in the middle, but it means that it gets more spacious.
Yeah.
Well, so that's what it is. That's what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
you know. And he said it about his own music, you know, it's not my invention. You know, so I think I've been trying to incorporate that, you know, more and more into my playing, and I try to talk about it with my students so they think about, you know, and again, everybody does with information whatever works for them.
It's always marvelous to listen to wisdom, and you shared your wisdom today with us. For example, this allegory with the talking and the expression.
But it's true.
It's a storytelling in many ways.
Sure.
And I want to thank you very much for having a time.